Okay, Aunt Lola, sorry it's taken me so long to put this video together. This is for my no-knead bread, and there is a little bit of kneading that I've added to it just because if you knead it a little bit, and I'm going to show you throughout this video, it makes for a better open crumb that mimics your sourdough. This bread looks and tastes just like sourdough, so we'll go ahead and get started. Also, before I forget, there's only 4 ingredients in this recipe. It's 3 cups of flour. I like King Arthur just because it has a higher protein content and it makes for a better quality of bread. So 3 cups of flour, 1.5 cups of warm water, a half a teaspoon of dry active yeast, and then a teaspoon of salt. I don't quite put that much in there just because we watch our salt around here, so I just put a dash in my hand and then I add it to the recipe. But I'm going to show you in the order in which I do it and what it's going to look like. It's going to look a little sticky, but you'll see as we go along. Okay, so I have my 3 cups of flour in here. I'm going to go ahead and I've got my active yeast and dry active yeast, and I'm going to add a half a teaspoon to that. I have kosher salt, and I'm going to add just a little, and just probably a half a teaspoon as well. Add that to it. Just go ahead and mix that dry ingredients together. Okay, and then I have my 1.5 cups of warm water. Just going to add this to my flour and dry mix. This is going to look super sticky and wet, but that's okay. You don't have to overwork it, but as you can see how it pulls, it looks kind of shaggy and wet, and that's what we want. And that's it. As long as all of our flour has been incorporated and is wet. Now, I'll just cover it, and then I let this set for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and then I'm going to do a kneading process on it, and I'll show you with just a spatula. And what it's going to do, it's going to cause it to be a more open crumb. You can leave it like this overnight for up to 8 hours, and then just make the loaf. If you add the kneading process that I'll show in the next step, it makes for a beautiful open crumb, and it really gives the effect of sourdough. So we'll be back shortly in about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Okay, so we're back. It's been 1 hour and 45 minutes that it's set aside and been resting. There isn't much growth, and that's fine. We're not worried about that. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and this is the kneading process that you use for sourdough. You're just going to take it from the outside and pull it in. Now before, it has this beautiful, it's starting to get this beautiful texture now. It's starting to look silky. Our glutens have relaxed and is allowing us to pull it together. So you're going to scrape from the outside of the bowl and pull into the center. And what this does, it kind of accelerates the process by trapping the gases within the inside to give us that nice open crumb. So I go around 2 or 3 times doing this, pulling it from the outside to the inside. Okay. Now I'm going to cover it back up, and then I'm going to let it rest for another 2 hours. Okay, so it's been about an hour and a half, and I'm going to do a second knead on it. And it's looking super silky. The gluten looks gorgeous. I'm just going to pull it from the outside and punch it in. And it's kind of late in the evening, so I think I'm going to wait until tomorrow to bake it, which is totally fine. You can just cover it up and leave it overnight and just let it set. The more that you do this, the bigger your crumb's gonna be, or the bigger your holes in your bread is gonna be. This will be the last time that I knead it before morning, before I actually bake it. And then I'll show you that process as well. So it went from being super sticky and shaggy to where it's actually holding together a lot better. And the dough's become really smooth. Okay. I'll just cover it back up. And I'm just gonna leave it overnight, and I'll bake it in the morning. And it's the next morning, and it has been sitting out for like 15 hours. And the longer it sits, honestly, the better it is. I've even left this in the refrigerator for a couple of days and then made my bread, and it's phenomenal. This is kind of like a no-fail recipe, but I wanted to show you how to handle this dough when you're ready to set it out to proof before we bake it. Okay. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a lot of good gas and air pockets all over it, and that's exactly what you want for a sourdough. It's very aromatic, and it's doubled in size just letting it set. Okay, so we'll get started. I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna dust my surface really well. Since it's a really tacky dough, you want a nicely floured surface. Okay, get my spatula. It's a very wet dough. And in this step, it's really important that you don't overwork the dough. So you're just gonna take it, you're gonna pull it in. See how it's sticking to my hands? Pull it in. Pull it in again. You can do it one more time if you feel that you need to, but don't do this more than twice. And I've got little gas pockets all over it, which means it's going to be a beautiful crumb. I went ahead and dusted a wooden rattan proofing box. This is what I use. If you don't have one of these, that's perfectly fine. You can use just a loaf pan if you want to proof it in, or a round bowl makes for a beautiful loaf as well. So I'm gonna take this, and it's wet, so you want to work fast and just set this in here like so. And I like to put the seam up top so that when I do dump it out into my pan to bake, this is going to be my bottom edge. So now I'm just going to cover it, and I'm going to let this set for no longer than 45 minutes. If it overproofs, then it's not going to want to rise in the oven. So we'll set this aside. While this is proofing for 45 minutes, I'm going to set the oven to 450 degrees. So I've got the oven set to 450 degrees, and I recommend Dutch oven. This looks horrible, but all I use it for is baking bread. And you want this in the oven with the lid off, set on the rack to heat the entire time. But today, one of my favorite pieces to bake in is this stone piece by Pampered Chef. I absolutely love cooking in this. So what I'll do is I will put this in the oven to heat with the while the oven is heating up. And another thing that I do is I have a piece of parchment paper that I'm going to put the bread on, and it makes it so much easier to place the bread down inside your hot Dutch oven without having to touch the sides. And I'll show you how I do that a little bit later on. But for now, we're going to let this rest. I'm going to put my stoneware in the oven so that it can get hot, and we'll be back in 45 minutes. All right, well, it's been 40 minutes, and we're going to go ahead and get the dough ready to put into our hot stoneware that is currently in the oven that has been preheating for a little over 40 minutes at 450 degrees. I have my piece of parchment paper that I'm going to use to place my dough on, and I just kind of push this down inside my stoneware just to kind of get a template for where the bread should go to be centered within the stoneware. And this is what I do. Just makes it easy, but since it's such a sticky dough, just place this over the rattan. You can place it over the bowl, and then I'm gonna flip it out. Beautiful. And it's in the center. One thing I like to do, because I do put a lot of flour inside the basket to make sure that it doesn't stick because it's so white, I go ahead and just dust it a bit. Get some of that excess flour off. It's got a beautiful shape, nice striations on it. And I don't like to leave that flour in there, so I'm just gonna sweep it up. Okay. And I can see how it's starting to relax a little bit, so if you want, you can push it in a little, just to kind of keep the form. On my sides. just learned this with trial and error. You don't have to do this if you don't want. And I'm going to score it. All right, and I'm going to drop it down inside of the hot stoneware. Place the hot lid. I'm going to put it back in the oven. And this is going to bake for 50 minutes. You want to bake it for 50 minutes at 450 degrees with the lid on. Do not remove the lid until your 50 minutes is up. Okay. My timer just went off. It's been 50 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the timer off. I'm going to leave the oven on because I may want to cook it a little bit longer to brown it. But let's open it up and see how she looks and see what we think. It's gorgeous. So just to get it a little bit more brown, I'll leave it in there for about 3 more minutes with that lid open. All right, so I'm taking my bread out of the oven. It's been 2 minutes. I'm going to take it out of the stoneware. And this is my bread. You can see how it's got nice crumb. The reason we leave the lid on it through the entire baking process is so that it gets a nice crusty crust to it. So it's nice and crunchy. If you don't like it crunchy, you can remove the lid halfway through your baking process. But inside it's nice and moist, and we'll come back and we'll cut it and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I sliced it. It's been about 15 minutes. Probably want to wait a little bit longer, but Philip couldn't wait. I want to show you. I took a couple slices and just look how pretty that crumb is. Just gorgeous. And it's so nice, soft, moist. I'll show you. Just beautiful crumb. Anyway, we really enjoy this bread. I've had loaves that have looked prettier, but this is decent. Anyway, all right, hope you enjoy.